Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I'm your host, Sunil Lalla, and joining us on the show this evening is the Honourable Keith Scotland. He's the Minister in the Ministry of National Security. He's been on the show before. He is the MP for Port of Spain South, and I believe he still is. And this time he joins us on the show as the Minister in the Ministry of National Security. Minister, good evening and welcome back to Delving Deeper.
Good evening to you, and thank you for having me.
I believe it's just been about 3 months. Approximately 3 months you've been in that post of the Minister in the Ministry of National Security.
2 months. And the 26th of July, August, September. 2 months.
You've been in Trinidad. You've been on the ground in Trinidad. You've been in Tobago. How has the experience been so far?
The Tobago experience was very rewarding. I decided to go to Tobago first because there was an escalation that I thought needed a physical, amongst other things, intervention. That bore some very, very significant fruit and results in that we met with the chambers of commerce, we met with the hoteliers, we met with stakeholders, and we met with the top brass of the police in Tobago. And we also visited every police station except the one in Charlottesville. So that was very, very instructive. And the interaction is bearing fruit as we speak. In fact, when I'm finished with this, I'm going to head back to office to respond to the Chamber of Commerce because there was an interaction and there were reports that came out, and I'm in the middle of doing that in order to follow up on what transpired at the visit to Tobago. And I intend to do the same in Trinidad. I intend to hit the police stations along with the Commissioner of Police and other top brass, just to make sure that they know that there's a presence there and that to hear what concerns are, very prevalent in those areas.
Staying with this style, Tobago, we've seen a bit of an increase in crime in Tobago, whether it be some murders or robberies and so on. What is the priority areas you've enlisted to go after that and ensure that crime is reduced in Tobago?
What you would find is that most of the more egregious crimes are committed with the use of illegal arms and ammunition. The first port of call must be to eliminate and eradicate illegal firearms off the streets, and that is a definite plan. Secondly, in terms of the redirection of the energies of the youth in Tobago and the persons in Tobago, that has to be a parallel approach because firearms and ammunition don't shoot themselves. They don't propel themselves. There are people who do that. And I think that that's a very critical part, both in Trinidad and Tobago, but particularly in Tobago because of the culture of Tobago. What we are seeing now is not the culture of Tobago that I have grown accustomed to.
What have we seen? You talk about firearms. What have we seen? How do we believe these firearms are entering the country, whether it be through the legal ports of entry or through some of the borders and so on? What are we seeing in terms of that? And do we have scanners in Tobago to address this situation?
We certainly have. And the last visit, this is one of the positives that came out of that visit. There are things in place relative to the ports, including at the Port Authority. There are things in place at the airports, and there are systems in place to identify any migration, any internal migration that is from Trinidad to Tobago of these items. And what is on Tobago, we are focused on trying to get them off the streets. I am not satisfied at this stage with the amount that have been retrieved this year, and we are ramping that up. as late as Tuesday night, there was a meeting with the commissioner and the top brass, Wednesday, sorry, and we have to implement and ramp up the program of reducing those firearms that are on the streets. There are too many.
We heard the THA just a couple of weeks ago talking about CCTV cameras and feeding it into the system, into Trinidad, for them to get access. Has this been talks ongoing with the THA?
Activated, no talks, action. 2,500 new cameras are being put in place there, and the system that is at the station, not at Old Grange, that's the station going into the main station in Tobago, not Scarborough. We don't want to give away too much, but what we can say is that is in place, and we intend to make sure that there are cameras in Tobago along with drones. That is a plan that is in place for Tobago and Trinidad also.
Tobago is such a small island and everybody knows everybody. I mean, Trinidad is already small, but I mean, Tobago is even smaller. There was a recent plea, I believe, by the THA Chief Secretary as well for some of the hotel owners and so on to let people know who is staying by them and to be able to track them and so on. Has been activated.
Sir, when I visited Tobago, the first meeting that was held with the hoteliers, not just the hoteliers, but those who do the Airbnb, and the villas, and that was a discussion, and that is in place, and I'm awaiting word from Mr. Lord relative to that, because it was very critical that we get that information whilst respecting persons' privacy. But if it is that you run an establishment and persons are coming on a regular basis and paying with loads of cash, that tells you something, should put you on notice. And that has been discussed in full, and there is a plan in place for that. And that is by no means novel. That is the first discussion that I had when I visited Tobago. And as I'm realizing now with your questions, we hit the right areas for discussion and solution.
As we're sticking with Tobago, I recently saw a media report that 2 senior officers in Tobago have been reassigned on the instructions of the Commissioner of Police. Can you shed some light on this?
I don't necessarily know what is the issue about a reassignment. A reassignment just means that there is a reorganization in the service. It's necessarily a non-issue. What is the issue as it relates to a reassignment? All it means is that those officers are going somewhere else and other officers are coming in their stead. There is no issue there.
Coming across to Trinidad now, I know you would have hit the ground running as soon as you were appointed and so on. How has the fight against crime and your portfolio going to tackle crime in Trinidad in particular?
The fight against crime is unrelenting. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that, sir, is because the criminals seem to be unrelenting. From another discipline where I come from, when we used to do a court matter, just for pure numbers, if the other side file 10 pages, I want to make sure that I respond 11 pages. If it is that the substance doesn't warrant it. But that was the approach, to meet the other side at an equal level and then surpass them. It means, therefore, what we are seeing is that there is a very limited amount of persons in this country who are hell-bent on criminality and not accepting and not utilizing the methods, not utilizing the programs that the government has put in place for them to make a better life. They've chosen another way of living. Well, the fight against crime is unrelenting. Before I came here, I was down with Honorable Minister Arari, and there we were having batch 1 of 2024, which is 164 recruits for municipal police. And if you know, think it's Section 53 of the Act, gives municipal police not just municipal powers, but the powers of any police officer of equal rank. And that is at a granular level, that's at a community level in terms of putting more police officers on the ground, municipal police, because where things happen in the areas, in the municipality. And we have done that, and there will be no relenting. That much I am certain about.
At a recent national security conference, I heard a police officer talk about children as young as 8 years old being involved in extortion.
That is sad on several levels. It is sad in that impressionable minds and bodies are being used for nefarious purposes. That's unpardonable. It's unpardonable. And that is something, however, that must have a multifaceted approach, because one would think that in this sphere, you would protect the vulnerable. But to inculcate young persons as young as 8 and 9 years into criminal activity, that does not augur well for the future, and we are certainly looking at that. And that approach really needs to be multifaceted, because it needs, and if it is, it means the implementing of the Education Act and the augmenting of the fines, because you're only fined if you know that there's a duty on every parent where there's a child of school age to send that child to school. And if you infract that, the penalty is only $75. So maybe we need to up the penalty, but certainly enforce it. An 8-year-old, only thing an 8-year ought to be doing is to go to school and learn.
We saw the Commissioner of Police making a plea for these certain children for the parents to be held accountable. I know you talk about the legal basis for them to go to school, but is there anything legal we can hold the actual parents accountable for?
That was actually my plea. And it was echoed by the Commissioner of Police, and I endorse it. I can only speak of my experience. And I can tell you that my parents and my guardian ensured that they were accountable for me. And mind you, as we are having the discussion and delving deeper, I think we have to consider having accountability of our children. If it is, we know that times have changed, but has it changed so much that a parent doesn't know what their child is bringing home in their school bags? I can bring home anything alien that wasn't given to me, that looked outside of what is the norm. I would have to give an explanation. And the explanation, it didn't take much for, if the explanation was out of sync with reality, for me to have to answer and account for it. Where do you house these SLRs, these illegal weapons? Let's be practical. They are not in space. They are not in a Star Trek ship. They are housed in people's houses. What about the accountability for that? What about that? The police has a duty, yes, to protect and serve, but isn't there a corresponding responsibility to say, look, let's come together and ensure that our country is not plagued or not continue to be plagued by the scourge of illegal firearms and ammunition? I think that accountability works both ways, and I would now, as you've raised the issue, want to call for greater accountability, not just on the citizens, but even on the police officers. I can tell you that I have been getting a little more granular and asking for certain information and action and making sure that there's that accountability. And hopefully when next we come back, you can say to me that I have seen an increased joint patrol. I have seen an increased presence of the police on the Lady Young, or when I go on the Eastern Main Road, because that is what we demand, because the situation now calls for it.
We've just seen the opening of the 5th session of the 12th Republican Parliament. It wasn't as formal as some of the years gone by. But in terms of your agenda, you talked about the fine, to raise that fine from $75. Would that be on your agenda for this upcoming parliamentary term?
The operative thing that is on my mind is crime and criminal activity. It really worries me, because I think Trinidad and Tobago wants to exhale. We want to live as we were accustomed to. Over the Independence weekend, for example, there was fireworks around the savannah, and then there was pan on the avenue. And I attended both, and I estimated about 30,000 people on the avenue. And because of the police presence on the avenue, there was no reports of any robbery, any incidents, any violence. What I noted was that the young people came out, and they conducted themselves accordingly. We would want to, I certainly would want to concentrate on assisting, on ensuring that there's the implementation of crime fighting measures to reduce the criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago. If you want me to go or to be more specific, I can be. Manpower. We would want more police officers to be recruited. It means that when you come to be recruited, of course, you must pass the test, because we will want to recruit a competent staff of men and women. 2, areas such as resources. The national security budget has always been one of the largest, and in fact, national security is one of the main focus in this year's, in anything that we do now. In fact, crime is the main issue. So we'd want to have more resources and I would say more effective allocation of resources. Something that troubled me, for example, one of the first acts I did as the minister in the Ministry of National Security was that we commissioned 5 new vehicles for a certain squad. That was done either on a Monday or on a Tuesday. I tried to stay off social media, but you can't escape it. And by the weekend, without calling out the squad, because I don't want to, I want to motivate. And when we were handing it over, part of my presentation was treat the vehicle in a husband-like manner. Treat it properly. Treat it and use it for the purpose that it was given. Do you know by the Saturday, one of the vehicles was literally written off? It broke my heart for more than one reason, because we had to make sure, we had to be strident to make sure they got the vehicles to use it for the purpose of which it was given. And then of the ironies of irony, of all vehicles they crashed. They didn't crash the TEF, you know. They crashed the TEG, and the most expensive vehicle. That, it only ripped the heart out of me for a second. Then I got my chin back up, but it's not what we want. We must utilize, in other words, the point I'm making is, what's the sense we provide these things and then it is not utilized for the purpose that it was provided, or it's abused? So that is another item. I think also balancing that, the young people, I want to say that the Ministry of Youth Development is a ministry that is doing so much for this country. We attended a graduation of MILAT last Friday at the Savannah, and these young men are getting a next opportunity in life. That is, you know, that is another way that we can take young people's energy away from criminal activity into something more productive. All of them graduated with a full certificate from there. Well, what we know as CXC and GC, I think it's now called CAPE. So that is another aspect that I would want to look at, and not as a soft approach, but as an alternative approach, because both approaches must be together. We have to have, unless people decide we're going to stop criminality, there must be a robust response to that. But on the other hand, you have to look at root causes, and that is something that we must implement. And what I'm saying is that there are the programs there that can assist in that regard.
That was quite an elaborate answer. But so inside here, you talked about the budget, and I want to ask you about the budget in terms of, we're going to see the budget read a month or two. In terms of your recommendations, I mean, national security is always up there with health and education as well. Have you made any recommendations to the Minister of Finance for funding for national security?
Yes. The next answer is wait on the budget and you will see it. But the answer is yes.
You recently held the opening ceremony for the Municipal Police Induction Training Program. Tell us about how this was and what's the main aim of this?
What is expected is that, well, there are 14 municipalities, but 4 are under the Service Commission. So 10 came, well, there were 10 areas that the persons who attended. What that will do, because it's 164, so if you divide that into 10, you get 6.4, but you can't 0.4 human beings. So let's say 6 or 7 persons. It will mean that there will be, for the next year, at least in the municipal corporations, at least 7 more persons on the ground to be added to the fight against crime. That's important because the more persons you have on the ground, the more, I think, as a deterrent you would have. And it is to address several issues. We have become so sophisticated in our nomenclature of things that, you know, when you look at things such as extortion, you think it is something that is heuristic, where somebody writes you a letter and you go and you deliver a briefcase. But what about things such as taxing? So you are doing your hard work to sell wings and fries, and somebody is telling you, well, for every box of wings and fries you sell, I have to get a percentage of that. So, you know, that has to go into your factors of production. Those are areas that, when again I meet with the municipal police, I'm going to tell them, because that happens, that's a localized thing. I will ask them to look at those, the taxing businesses. That's a very, very critical area. It's an offshoot of extortion. It's more prevalent. And what I want to say is that I will ask the public to report it. There's a number that was given by the officer, Officer Smith. Report it. And if there are more police on the ground, how can the taxers come? They can't come if the police are there. They'll have to find another method. So that will be a deterrent. So in that regard, I think that the recruits, once they have done their 20-week, it's a 20-week course, I think they will add it to the manpower, and that goes back to one of my main themes that I told you about, the increasing of the manpower. And you remember that the municipal police, they have all the powers and responsibilities of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Force.
As you touched on extortion there, is this a new trend? We're seeing extortion against businessmen, but is this a new trend? And, is there plans to tackle this situation?
The plans to tackle have already been in place. The statistics for this year show that there were 19 reported incidents of extortion and 9 were detected and solved. I know about it because one of my last acts being in private practice, there was an attempt to extort a client, and we reported it to the police, and that was solved and it was eliminated. And we know sometimes where it's coming from. As we are speaking here, I would want to caution persons who lose pets and lose vehicles and lose items for putting their numbers out there, Because what unscrupulous persons do is that they don't take your number to help you retrieve your pet. They take your number to call you, to try to extort from you. I haven't thought about what is the alternative, but we must find a safer alternative instead of putting ourselves out there and our personal information out there, and persons and unscrupulous persons use it for nefarious or for a purpose which it was not put out there. So I'm warning the public about that. It is clear, it is present, and it is real.
As we begin to wind up, Minister, what would you like to achieve during your tenure as the Minister in the Ministry of National Security, and how has that transition from MP to Minister been?
The transition I'll answer the last question first. The transition has been seamless in terms of the transition. The learning curve has been steep because it's more responsibility, it's more a cabinet responsibility. How has it been? I think that my stint outside in life learning has prepared me for this. And if I can achieve, and I want to achieve, one main goal, which is the reduction of serious crime, serious firearm-related crime in Trinidad and Tobago, the reduction of the increase in the feeling of safety of the citizens, and that will be done. I am adamant and I am steadfast that the police presence, joint patrols must be seen in critical areas, because if they are there, people will not be as brazen. The brazenness of what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, it must be a consequence of a feeling that there are no consequences or there's no deterrent. Well, within the four walls of the law, there are consequences and there are deterrent. And I have been, and I will continue to call on the police. I'm receiving the cooperation that I desire, but because of the state of affairs, it could never be enough until it is go. We are not saying that they will have zero crime, but as close to zero as we can have. That is what I sincerely want to achieve. The introduction of young persons into criminal activity, it sincerely bothers me, because I like young people to be young people and enjoy their lives. And I feel that if detected, then I would seek permission. I can't appear in court anymore, but to be, court is now online, to be there and see what is going on, because we would want stringent sentences for those things. I don't want to step on the toes or overstep the boundaries of the judiciary, but I would like to see the laws as it relates to firearms and ammunition offenses. I would like to see the penalties a little imposed a little more stringently, a little more robustly. I think that's an aspect of the prosecutorial arm of the state, insisting on making its voice heard in the sentencing exercise. It is disheartening when persons who are charged with certain serious offenses are granted bail and are allowed, and bail is a constitutional right, so we accept that, but are granted bail that is not in keeping with the seriousness of the offense. That is something that I want to look at, and in that regard, I am almost finished with a training program. I have asked a senior counsel to conduct that program, and because we're always thinking that program will be on a Saturday, so I'm not taking the prosecutors out of their court job. If we can do it on a Friday for some of the investigating officers, but we intend to train over 2,000 police. We intend to utilize the judiciary, to ask them to come in to assist in the learning. Justice of Appeal Jillian Lucky, who's I think the chairman of the JIE, Judicial Education Institute, is very proactive in that regard. I am going to ask for assistance from her good office in order to assist us. The Honorable Chief Justice Ivor Archie is very receptive, and we are going, Trinidad and Tobago, we are going to arrest, pun intended, this situation of crime in this country. It is not acceptable to me. And I feel that Trinidad and Tobago wants to be the Trinidad and Tobago that we can be and that we have been. And if you know of those who are trying to get us to where we don't want to be, then help us to help Trinidad and Tobago.
Minister, just before we conclude, your final thoughts?
I'm not at all satisfied with the levels of criminality and levels of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. The government is putting resources, but resources alone cannot do it. I've given you the example of that vehicle. That example is in my mind. I want us to utilize the resources, and I want all hands on deck, and I will insist upon it. However, there are root causes. And in terms of root causes, things such as the youth club, community policing, there are opportunities out there for young people. Young urban youth is becoming now young rural youth. Don't be lured and be attracted to the issue or to the spectra of the quick buck. We know in Trinidad, and we certainly know in Tobago, of the rewards of hard work. I'm a living example of it. You just do your work, the rewards will come. It may not come overnight. It will not come overnight, actually. Particularly Tobago, you know about it. In fact, not Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. We know about hard work because our parents taught us the results of hard work. So I'd want us to buckle down. I'd want us to be united against this scourge. If we are, I have no doubt in my mind that we can overcome this, what we face now. And I am insistent upon it. There's no wavering in that regard. I can't tell you everything that is being done, but I can tell you things are being done. And I hope that you can report that you would see the presence of the police. You would see a less brazen criminal in Trinidad and Tobago. And what we will see and experience is a safer Trinidad and Tobago, because it's the feeling also. The feeling is important, you know. And when we don't feel secure, we huddle in our houses and we put up burglar proofing, or we migrate. And when we migrate, we lose serious assets that can help Trinidad and Tobago. I am going to do my part. I've been given a responsibility. It is an awesome responsibility, but I intend to the best of my ability to carry out the responsibility that I have been given.
Well, Minister, as I said, since you assumed office, you've been on the ground in Trinidad, you've been in Tobago, and I'm sure if we had another associate island, you would have been there as well. But thank you very much for joining us on this week's episode. You are very welcome. I'm sorry we couldn't do it before, but you called me just as I got appointed, and I'm able to speak like this now because I'm acquainting myself with the new landscape. So, you know, if you had called me before as an attorney, I would tell you I'm coming immediately. So I'm acquainting myself, and as I grow more acquainted with this fight that we're involved in, I think we will get a more effective response. I know that Minister Hines, as we speak, he's chairing a mercy committee. We're working, and I know for sure Trinidad and Tobago, your Prime Minister does not sleep when it comes to crime. I know that for sure. That's the most I can tell you in this forum. Join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am Sunil Lalla. On behalf of the entire crew, have a great night.